What's up, everybody? Just picked up Brandon Rust from NASA Agritech here in Chicago, Illinois. We are going for a nice walk, about to talk about nutrient uptake and antagonizing nutrients and all sorts of stuff. What's up, Brandon? How was your visit at NASA Agritech?
Oh yeah, it was cool. I went out there earlier, maybe about a month ago. I came out here too, so that was just to get introduced to George, who is the CEO of the company, and he actually worked for NASA, helping put the Apollo rockets into space, and the last 35 years he's spent in the agriculture sector.
Jeez.
So he has, he's actually, he's an engineer, chemical engineer, civil engineer, pretty much everything, microbiologist, chemist, all wrapped up into one. And I was just he was impressed by my approach to looking at a problem when you look at something holistically, instead of trying to figure out a simple fix. And I guess he just gravitated towards me, and he invited me out to learn, and I'm just trying to absorb as much as I can now. That's the biggest thing is for me. I just want to be able to learn everything I can, and use the knowledge so I can help develop the agriculture sector, help sustainable regenerative agriculture, help build back up soil carbon levels, and he's giving me a broader understanding of how all the systems inherently work. So,
Jeez, man. Fascinating stuff. You gave me these crazy Chinese nutrient packs. He said he was doing work in China. There's a lot of stuff that is going on in agriculture elsewhere in the world that we just haven't integrated yet into American, let alone cannabis farming.
Yeah. Well, so he spent a lot of time in China, and China doesn't have a lot of arable farmland, and so they needed a solution to try to be able to figure out how to feed 1.4 billion people. There's a huge problem with chemical fertilizers, inorganic chemical fertilizers, and it's because typically if you see something like a 10-10-10 nutrient, right, it'll have 30% of nutrient in it. That other percent is filler, so it's very inefficient. And then only 10% of that 10% of, let's say, the nitrogen that's in it
actually gets absorbed.
Is going to be usable.
Right.
And then only 2% of the soil root system will even come in contact with that 10% that is available.
Right.
So we're looking at, when you do the math on that, the amount that's being added it doesn't have a good use efficiency. And so what he's developed is methods in which they can molecularly attach all of the elements needed for plant growth to carboxylic acid, which is it's a humic fulvic acid. And they're taking the COOH, the carbon, to oxygen and hydrogen, and they're able to build these carboxylic acid chains. And because they have hydrogen on them, they act as essentially magnets, and so they're able to bond the elements and keep them from oxidizing or being reduced. They keep them in an available form, so that way, that when they're in the soil, the efficiency of use and availability is exponentially increased by huge factors too.
Wow. And it's a simplified application system, because they look like little, we're coming up on the car here soon, I'll show them on camera, but they look like little mylar packets of sauce or something. And you just crack it open, and it's a liquid application, like you said, mix into a 1 gallon or something.
Yeah, so those are just samples, or kind of used for pre-mix. Like you have a gallon of water, you could empty one of those in there, and those are actually a product that they have the distribution for in China, even though it's an American technology. They also have manufacturing in Mexico as well.
So what the hell? This is an American technology and it's a best practice, and then we send it over there and then keep going about our stupid ways?
Well, that's the thing. See, they still use most of the petrol industry, right? The American petrodollar, and that part of that is the chemical extractions that come from those industries that are pretty standard in the agriculture sector. That being said, until like we're not so dependent on fossil fuels, that may continue because they have access of all these products. They have to figure out what to do with them. Maybe just trying to turn these and making them more efficient would help reduce a lot of the outcome attaching them to carbon in this way. What he did in China, they have so much information and studies because they've been over there for so long, and they've converted to this style of fertigation in China. That's why their food quality is better all around. Even their meat is better because the inputs that they give to the animals is a higher quality. So what he was able to do utilizing this technology was take the protein content of rice from 6% to 11%.
Jeez.
And then they were also able to get double the harvest because they were able to make two harvests in the same season. And you know, that's a huge improvement. That's 100%. They doubled everything.
Jeez.
Practically. The nutritional value of the food
And the yield.
So
Incredible, man. Of course, I'm sure the members and followers who are watching this are having their minds blown. We're back here at the car. Let me show you what these look like.
these will all be in English too, right? So we're gonna redo the labels.
I'm keeping these, man.
These are for you.
I was gonna call them kanji, but that's the Japanese word. I guess they're Chinese characters. So check this out. Just came out of the garden too. Forgive the dirty hands. How crazy is that?
Yeah, so a single drop of this fertilizer contains all of the macro and micro elements: NPK, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, all your micronutrients, and it's on a molecular form, right? So we're talking about these carbon chains that are long carbon chains, and they have the full elemental complex built into it. So that way, when they're in soil, they're not going to interact with the other particles and things that are in the soil. They're going to stay in a metabolically available form. So when they do come in contact with roots, or when they're through either mass flow, through inception, or through diffusion.
That's all right.
I'm high. That weed was good.
So they're not going to mess with anything else. They're just going to be available. They're going to be slurped right up.
Yeah, and okay, so here's one of the things, right? Let's take CaSO4, right?
Uh-huh.
Calcium sulfate.
Uh-huh.
So calcium, Ca plus, is positively charged, and then the SO4 is sulfate, and that has a negative charge,
Uh-huh.
right? So they bond together to create calcium sulfate, aka gypsum.
Yep.
Now, those are weakly bonded, but when you introduce water, there's more hydrogen in the water will react if it's hydrogen plus or OH minus, right?
Okay.
And so what happens is you put that chemical into the water, and it changes. It splits the calcium from the sulfur, right? And so so both of those are available in that form in the plant, right? But the thing is, now you have this positively charged particle over here, and you have this negatively charged particle over here, and they're going to react like magnets react. So that calcium will pick up an anion, depending on what it is. If there's a ton of, something that's like, let's say, chloride,
Okay.
right? That's negatively charged. You might end up locking out that calcium because there's too much chloride. It works on a with chemistry. So
on a
depending
chemical
on the
level,
charges
yeah.
and
Molecular
how these
level.
things either fall into solution or how they're attracted or detracted to different surfaces, it's all different. You know,
Right.
it just the chemistry changes. That's the problem with the elements, right? But when you are attaching molecules to the actual chains and that are staying there in available form, they're there, dude, and the plant can use it.
So, and this is exactly what you're doing with this product, is you're avoiding all of that and, like you said, making it available and useful.
Yes.
Fucking very interesting, man. I can't get enough of this package for sure. Look at that thing.
Little.
Look at that happy rice farmer.
I think the packages are. They might be recyclable as well.
Picking right up where we left off. Carbon based, you say? That's what this product is. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about carbon in general.
Okay, so carbon equates to energy, right? Like all of life is based off of, you know, molecules attached to carbon that make complex things. The reason why, if we're talking about organic chemistry, we're usually talking about carbon-based molecules. When we're talking about what plants utilize, they utilize mostly inorganic elements. They're not attached to carbon. The carbon acts as a catalyst for the absorption. It acts as a taxi cab to keep it in a state that's available, right? That's mobile and the plant can use. So when we're talking about a fertilizer that's carbon-based, it means that all of the elemental nutrient that's associated with that is attached to the carboxylic acid or the carbon that's in here.
So it's already pre. I don't want to use the word chelated. That's not correct.
That's what
it is. Okay.
Yeah,
well, there
it's
you go.
chelated. So it's a that's what chelation is. Usually they'll do it
bond,
with
right?
they'll usually do it with another chemical, but this is using carbon. And so the benefit of this is, right, plants use carbon. They take it in the form of CO2 through their stomata. And then they also take it from their root cells in the form of carbon monoxide, right?
Sure.
But the thing is, carbon monoxide will react with a lot of things around it because of its charge. So it's not going to stay that very quick. So it would need to be right in the vicinity of the root of the cell that can accept that to be available.
Okay.
But microbiology, which will also compete for the same nutrition, has access to the fertilizer as well.
Sure.
So if biology can move freely, free soil living microorganisms that are taking off of these carbon chains, all of the elemental molecules, and using them for growth, they're going to mobilize that into their body, and they could be moving it into different locations in the soil. And if, you know, we talked about before how usually the soil to root volume is about 2%. So only 2% of that plant's surface area is touching soil where available nutrient exchange is going to be happening. So if you have things that are moving in and out of root zones, that are mobilizing, you know, maybe dying and stuff like that,
Right.
colonizing, doing their thing, that should increase the availability of the nutrient that way. One of the things too is, since the carbon is available, you know, all of these microorganisms need that carbon. They use it they assimilate it and they use it to build other substances and compounds.
Sure.
Things like secondary metabolites, which might be enzymes or amino acids, but these also benefit the soil chemically because amino acids can chelate different elements. Right. They can improve calcium uptake. They can do a lot of different things. A lot of these substances act as like signaling molecules. So
those will feed your
it feeds the biology as
and
well.
it's a nutrient delivery system.
So what'll happen is typically with like a chemical fertilizer, the reason why it harms biology is because there's no carbon associated with it, and when it disassociates or falls into solution, things like sodium and chloride are present, and those, you know, because of their charge, they can rupture the membranes from different types of biology.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
you know, this has the ability to do, you know, more than just, you know, add the element in there. You know,
Yeah,
it has the
deliver the
ability to
NPK.
keep it in a form that's going to be metabolically available.
Nuts, man.
Essentially, all crops and all of them that are known, that are cultivated, have certain nutritional values that should be met to maximize those crop potentials. There's been so much research done throughout the last 120 years.
Yeah.
All these variables are known. The problem is that a lot of these variables aren't meant in these conventional agronomic settings for crop production. And one of the things that has been a tool for a long time that people do utilize is things like soil testing, saturated paste, tissue, and sap testing, because they can maximize the efficiency, the use, and the time of application for when they need to be applying what. Because that, especially when you're at scale, that plays a huge part in the quality and the yield of the crop, right? Is how much of what do I need? You know, you need to look at what's deficient first in the soil. You need to supplement with what it's deficient. You need to know when you need to apply, and you need to know how much you need to apply. So those are kind of like the parameters for understanding. And if you have data that tells you what your soil looks like as far as the numbers, you know, calcium, magnesium, your iron, potassium, just everything that's in there. So with cannabis, you can do the same thing. You can test the soil, you can add whatever you need to. I use mineral sulfates and organic matter. You need to have carbon, obviously. And you know, get to these sufficient levels, you do your saturated paste test to see how things are falling in solution. And what happens is this, right? The reason why things are antagonistic is because everything has a certain charge. And also these molecules have a certain radius, right, in which their charges orbit. So the larger their radius, the weaker their charge. And so you have things like calcium, Ca2++ is an available form of calcium. It has 2 hydrogen. It's positively charged 2 times more than, let's say, potassium, which is K plus, right? 1 hydrogen. And when there's an exchange on the site of, let's say, some organic material or on a clay surface, there's different parts of those surfaces are going to be positively and negatively charged. And so just like magnets, some things are going to be repelled, some things are going to be attracted. So let's take let's use calcium and potassium for example. So let's say you have a calcium molecule attached to that's kind of, you know, circling around clay colloid. Now that comes in close enough contact for the it comes in close enough contact to the root surface, and it's able to be taken in by the root cell. An exchange is going to happen because there's an exchange site that thing just came off of, right? That was a positively charged site, right? So now that thing came off. It's going to take up to something that has a charge of 2. It could take up potentially 2 potassium ions, right, in exchange. So what it's doing is it's pulling 2 ions of potassium out of solution
In exchange for
and exchanging it for calcium, right? But the thing is, so if you have not enough of that potassium to exchange on that site, you might pull up something like sodium, right? Then sodium isn't an essential plant nutrient. It's antagonistic to calcium, magnesium, potassium. So now that exchange site is filled with something that's unusable. Right?
That's crazy.
So you're going to have to find something that has a higher charge than that sodium. Okay?
Right. Jeez, dude. That's a mind-blowing example. I have a couple follow-up questions. That just makes me think about what people talk about, like salt buildup in media
Yes.
and it locking things out?
Yeah.
Is that basically the
that's
phenomenon
what it
you
is.
just described? That's
that is
fascinating.
the exact phenomena. So what's
Wow,
happening
dude.
is all of those exchange sites that would hold a positive cation are all
sodium.
now filled up with sodium
Yeah.
cations, right? And the sodium is bonded to there stronger than the magnesium and the potassium. So now you've locked those two things out.
Okay.
So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to dump a bunch of a positively charged cation into the soil
Right.
to knock all of those off.
Sure.
So they're replaced.
Or like I've heard there are like enzymes that do a really good job of
Or
that,
if you
things like
flush really, really
Right.
well,
Sure.
you know, that's why
Physically.
flushing and then adding things like calcium to
Jeez.
a soil that has high sodium helps mitigate that sodium. Because what happens is you add the calcium stronger, binds to those sites, and then
Kicks off the sodium.
the sodium is in solution, and the
Wow.
sodium can then be leached out.
that. Right. Wow, dude. That is fascinating. So that's why you want to do a heavy runoff, because you want to get it out of the soil, and that's what's being exchanged.
If you have something like sodium or
That's
chloride,
crazy.
yeah, you want to rinse that shit out because those are antagonistic and it is affecting those exchange sites.
It is so crazy. Okay, and then the first question that I wanted to ask was, like, you described this kind of perfect solution and you know, the different charges of these minerals. When you take a look at your average home grower, maybe using like a bottled line, where do you see the biggest flaws in that thinking? Like, for instance, I
Okay.
see a lot of products have like 0, 50, 30s.
I'll tell you right now.
Like, you don't use any of
let's
that
just
stuff.
let's just say you're using a one part just for example, right? And that one part is 10 10 10.
Okay.
10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, 10% potassium, right?
Good go.
So you have 70% total availability of those three nutrients, okay?
Okay.
70% of that is water.
Yeah.
So immediately the use efficiency drops down,
Of
right?
course. Yeah, sure.
Bam.
Yeah.
Okay. Only 10% of that 10% of that solution is going to be is going to stay biologically available to the plant. But only 2% of that 10% that stays available is going to come in contact with the root surface area.
Jeez. So it's just an inefficient delivery system. Or
It's just a complete. That is the biggest problem with not just like inorganic fertilizers, synthetics, or even mineral sulfates.
Yeah.
Like I use. They're still not that efficient.
Right. Dude, you're so hilarious. They're not efficient enough.
You know, so efficiency and use time of application, all the things are all important factors. Again, you have to look at the things holistically. Not, oh, what does my plant need? Dude, when does your plant need it? Like, why? Find out why it needs it, man. You know, like that's
Yeah.
all those things are going to regulate the function. The whole thing is this, right? People, I don't think a lot of people understand how plants work, right? So you have photosynthetic energy that is okay. So you have let me back up. You have two main parts, right? You have two main things that the plant needs. Three things, sorry. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It makes all of its food out of those components with a little bit of help from the other elements.
Sure.
Okay? So it gets its CO2 from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere,
yeah.
right? It goes into the plant. What happens is there is a process inside of the cell that takes place. And what happens is ribulose, 1,5-biphosphate, carboxylase, oxygenase, which is a phosphorus enzyme. It splits one of the oxygens off of the CO2. Okay, it turns the CO2 into carbon monoxide. One of those oxygens is what is released. That's like, oh, plants breathe oxygen. It's because of this process where it's cleaving off one of the molecules on the carbon di to oxygen. So then it has this carbon monoxide, mono 1, and it transports that carbon monoxide molecule into another reaction chamber, another part of the cell, right? We'll come back to this part in a second.
Okay.
Another process is happening over here where water is being translocated, and don't think of it as water. Think of it as like a gas or a vapor, because this is in a molecular form. That's why transpiration occurs, because it's not fluid. It's
okay.
it's a
When you
gas.
hack your plant, it doesn't just spill liquid water everywhere.
No, it's because it's a gas.
That's an interesting thought, man. See, I'm such a lay person, even that is mind-blowing to me, but please continue.
So it's taking the H2O, 2 hydrogen, 1 hydrogen, 2 oxygens, right? It's taking that up. It's using photosynthesis, photo excitement of the hydrogen elements that comes from the energy from the sun to excite the particles and split off the hydrogen from the oxygen.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then it takes that hydrogen molecule that it just split in the chloroplast of the plant, and it takes it to that reactor that we talked to before. And then everything starts to happen. What do you have? You have COH. Now what do you add? More COH, more COH. Then you get glucose. What is it? 6, 12, 6, I think, if I remember. Right? So it's those 3 molecules. And the other elements are facilitating the bonding of those carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen molecules, because that's what everything is made out of, right? Then they build up, like nitrogen has a molecule of amino acids, has a molecule of nitrogen in it, right? So they're using the elements to make hydrogen, carbon, oxygen chains. That's their food. That's what they're doing. They're making their own food. They're making the vitamins, enzymes, proteins, everything they need to grow, all their cells, the walls, the lignin, cellulose. Every compound that's a complex carbon configuration happens in these reactors.
Wow. You're right. I didn't know how plants work. And I think it's funny how we give, back to your average grower, we give so much attention to the nutrition. It's kind of like you just explained so much beyond just nutrition. And specifically when we say nutrition, it's like we focus on NPK. We focus on like 3 things, like, just pump it up full of, potassium, or add more calcium. Like, you know what I mean? When you describe it as that holistic process, it just reveals how much more complex it is.
Dude, these systems think of it like astrophysics, right? Look at, get a telescope and explore the universe, all that infinite amount of space and matter and molecules. It's the same exact thing, but we're just scaling it down, right?
Yeah, the microverse.
I really think that time is not linear, but it's just being able to comprehend things at scale, right? Because all of these things, that's why the mantra of the masters are as above, so below, because systems in nature mirror each other on macro and micro scales.
Exactly, man.
And it's all based off of complex sets of mathematics and geometry.
I mean, that's what really blows my mind, again, as an extremely layperson. When you break down the chemistry, how the core of it is all math.
Yeah, I mean,
like science is just mathematics with different kind of representations instead of numbers.
It's technology that was literally developed here,
and then we export it.
Yeah, I think probably because
corporate
he
interests
didn't want to get fucking knocked off. He didn't want to get whacked.
Dude, that's so fucking crazy. I believe it. And you're right. It's corporate. It's powerful corporate interests who are keeping this kind of the farming status quo at play. And at the very least, they'll fuck with your shit and put you out of business and bankrupt your farm. And then at the very worst, like you said, if you kind of...
Well, I'm going to be I'm going to be competing with single-use plastic. If you go to the supermarket or anywhere, Home Depot, whatever, a nursery, and you go buy a little pack of little, whatever, onions or tomatoes, the little starters, they usually come in like something that you're gonna have to transplant. You're gonna have to pull them out of and transplant into your final soil. Yeah. So if you have a NutriPot,
garbage, literal garbage.
So if you have one of those NutriPots that I'll have soon, you could have like a little 6-pack of NutriPots that has the carbon based, and since it's carbon, right, you can take the water out of it and it's solid, so you can cure this nutrient into a solid pot. So what happens is you could have maybe like a 6-pack that has all your your planters in there with your soil and your little cutting, and then you can just take that rip it right off, plant it right in the soil, the thing's going to have what, maybe like 60, 70 grams of 100% concentrated nutrient that it has
Wow.
access to, that's available, you know. So, and it makes less transplant shock. There's no waste. It's biodegradable. It just biodegrades into the nutrient in the soil.